Hey there, if you've been struggling to develop fast hands, clean single strokes, better stick control, smooth rolls around the toms, or anything related to hand technique, speed, dynamics, and precision, this is exactly the video you need. In this tutorial, I'm going to break down how to get your hands faster, the most ergonomic and efficient body motions for speed and control, how to find the correct grip and hold the sticks the right way, how to take full advantage of the rebound, how to practice with regular or very heavy sticks, and the system I use to develop speed, endurance, and consistency. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly what to practice and how to practice it to finally unlock fast, clean, controlled hands. First, I wanted to take a moment to introduce myself. In case you haven't heard of me, my name is Payne, and I've been developing instructional drum methods for many years, driven by a deep passion for drumming and education. Over the past 10 to 15 years, I've had the privilege of teaching hundreds of students around the world. In addition to teaching, I've contributed to a biomechanic research project in France at the University of Nantes, focused on analyzing leg movement, ankle motion, and posture while playing drums, an experience that has deeply informed my approach to technique and performance. As a touring musician, I've performed with some of the most influential bands in the metal and death metal scene, and had the honor of playing on many of the world's most prominent festivals and stages. If you're curious about my instructional methods, you can find everything on my website, jamepaynedrums.com. If you like this video, my content, or my teaching method, don't forget to subscribe and let me know in the comment below your thoughts or what you think about it by putting a like. As you know, that always helps. Now back to the video. Okay, awesome. So if you know me and you know my system, you know that the first thing that I like to start with is always understanding the body motions as best as possible without having to deal with external forces like the sticks, the rebound, or any of these elements. So I would just start to understand the wrist motion and my hand position just by placing my hand in the most relaxed way, and then I would kind of close my fingers, simulating holding a stick, and then I would just start moving my wrist, okay? So there are certain things that I notice, and I know already that some people might be asking questions like, should the thumb be sideways? Should the thumb be up, like looking upward? Should it be a rotating motion? Should it be a like vertical up and down motion? We'll get through all these elements down the video, but for now, the most simple position and motion will be this one. And so I already see how certain parts of my hand are moving, how the motion is happening, and so I will have to keep this in mind for when I will hold my stick and understand how different things will be. If I see that, you know, things are very different, then maybe there's something that I have to adjust, and because the more we can keep the hand, and you can keep the hand in the natural position, the better, because it means that we are not activating muscles that much, right? So the simple, like naturally we will be in this position, but then when we hold a stick, we are in completely different positions, and we're, you know, choking the stick, and we're opening the shoulder, and we're, you know, putting the elbow in this position. These are all activated muscles that we didn't have when we were just starting off. So why is this important? Because any extra muscular activation that we do, it's like slowly hitting the brake on a car, which is my usual example, and then we start to like press the accelerator, which is activating, so creating stiffness around the arm, and then starting to move through the stiffness. And as we will start to do this, if we start from already an activated muscle, we will just kind of like start to put more stress and more pressure on that muscle. So we will end up being less able to move smoothly our body, in this case the wrist. Instead, if we avoid that and we keep like a natural position, it means that we're keeping the muscles as relaxed and deactivated as possible, which is essential if we want to start pushing speed, having high dynamics, and work on endurance. Pushing speed because the less tension we will have on the on the wrist and on the muscles, the faster we can activate and deactivate the muscles. If there is a constant activation, it will slow everything down. Endurance, because if we have a constant tension, we'll get tired sooner because we're getting tired faster. Instead, if we activate and deactivate as much as possible the muscles as we're moving the body, then we'll get tired later because we are putting less stress and less constant stress on the muscles. So we'll have more endurance, dynamic as well. It will benefit because we are allowing the muscle and the body to move smoothly without, limiting the motion and without, stressing the muscle, and so limiting the range of motion that the body can do. So starting from a very relaxed and deactivated position, it's always the best. And it's what we want to try and keep even when we have sticks and we're playing, our stuff. Of course, then there will be a lot of situations like the normal thing will be of having to move already our arms to reach the hi-hat, to reach the ride, to reach the toms. We're not gonna always be in the same position, so there will already be activation that we will have to do because we have to reach certain parts of the drum. So if on top of that we have other extra activations, then we're really working against our own interest, right? With this said, we already have an answer for every time we will be asking ourselves, is this the right position? Should I do this? Should I do that? Or if we feel like some tension, we can film ourselves and look at what the body is doing, and we will see maybe the shoulder is okay, the elbow is okay, but the wrist has extra tension. Maybe we're keeping our hands too high or too low, and so we're working only on the up motion or only on the down motion. There's a lot of details that we can start having answers for just by seeing our natural body positions. Okay, so that's why it's important for me to always start from there, so that I can study my body before putting it under pressure and already with external, to deal with external things like the sticks, the rebound, the pedal, the springs, and all of these things. From here, we can start, of course, noticing that just by moving our hand, like our wrist motion up and down, we have two motions, up motions and down motion. Very similar to our ankle motion. In fact, I always compare the ankle motion to the wrist motion because it's kind of the same concept, right? Like pulling up, we will use more the upper part of our forearm. Pushing down, we will use more the lower part of our forearm. So it's like a shin calf muscle thing. We have the same here. So strangely enough, we can see how there's correlation between things. There's correlation in how the muscles and the muscle groups are used and activated, right? There's activation in the up motion of the upper part and deactivation of the lower part, and then the other way around. There's deactivation of the upper part and activation of the lower part. So with this said, we can start understanding another aspect, that depending on how high we will keep our forearm, high from the snare, like compared to the snare position, we will then develop more a down motion or more an up motion. And so calibrating also the position of how high we're keeping the forearms, it's important because if we have our sticks are too low, like our hands are too low, we will mainly use the upper part of our forearm, and we will use very little the rest of the muscles, but we might end up overworking one part of the muscle groups and underworking the other part, so it might not be very efficient. And the same if we keep our forearms too high, maybe we're using the lower part way more than the upper part. And so understanding that we're using these two muscles, we should already think of calibrating as well as possible the height of the forearm. It's not random. It's not just like, oh, whatever. It's like it could be here, but it could be here, or it could be a little bit lower, and everything, all these positions will change how much we're using one muscle compared to the other. So if we're overworking one muscle group compared to the other, that might cause us to get tired and to prevent us from, you know, reaching certain speeds or endurance or dynamics. All these elements are impacted because we are not paying attention to these details. And so this is another important aspect of just understanding the body position and optimizing this type of thing. Sorry for the interruption. This will be super quick. If you're into this episode, you can find full lessons, breakdowns, and workouts for this exact topic on my website. Just use the code at checkout for a great discount. All right, back to the video. Okay, another important part here is that we could develop the wrist motion in two different ways. We could hold our hands as we were just doing in the most kind of like basic position, having our thumb looking sideways, like being on the side, and palm facing down, and so going more up and down. Or we could turn our thumb upwards, which is called a French grip position, and we could see that we don't have the same possibility of moving the wrist, right? And so, of course, this will be a more obvious position, but in case certain people are used to playing with thumbs up and have a more of a French grip position, we could see how, like, the wrist motion, because we don't have a lot of possibility of motion like in this way, we could compensate with a rotating motion. Some people might be completely unaware of this because they're more just used to playing using wrist motion in more of a German grip, but some people might have noticed of experienced this weird rotating motion of the wrist, which I compare it and I think it as a French grip wrist motions, but because we don't have a lot of space, it's a more of a rotating motion, which is different from the molar, which is a lateral development of the motion, but it's kind of like more a whipping motion. Here, it's not much of a whipping motion, it's just a rotating motion. And the rotation of this motion happens, if we can think of the thumb being as a pivot point, where kind of like the sticks use it as a lever point and then the rotation happens around there. And if we turn this in a more regular German grip position, I say regular for mainly the wrist motion, we could see how this can be a similar setup also for here, in the sense that the thumb could become like a pivot point for the rotation or the movement of the wrist motion. So with this said, we understand more or less how we should position our body to optimize, you know, the activation and stay more in the natural position, the height of the forearms to the snare, and also how does the wrist motion develops. Like, we don't want it has to be as a defined motion as possible to avoid, you know, having different hands, completely different hands, or a motion that it's not as efficient. We want to understand that the thumb could be kind of like a pivot point, and so no matter, you know, if we have a more like bent wrist position or a more straight wrist position, the thumb, it's still kind of like a pivot point of the motion, and so we understand then how we should develop everything when we have our sticks in our hands. So a good workout that we can do is to start to develop this body motion, right? So that just by keeping bare hands, no sticks, understanding the wrist motion, developing a good motion, especially developing the motion and keeping the fingers as relaxed as possible. And we will see how important it is to keep the fingers relaxed throughout this entire video. So we can do it in this way, we can do it even only with our with our index, which is even closer to what we would then do with our sticks, because the position will be kind of similar. So we can also tap only with our index and simulate already the motion of wrist motion holding our sticks. This is very close. This is the closest way of practicing the wrist motion without the sticks. Awesome. So now that we have an understanding of how the body should be working, the most important part, in my opinion, in developing the wrist motion is the grip. How to hold the sticks in our hands efficiently is what will allow us to stay relaxed and have our fingers relaxed and make everything work. 90% of the problems that I see in people that are getting stuck with speed or endurance or anything, the control on their hands, it's not because of the motion itself, it's not because of the technique itself, it's because of the grip. Grip and technique are different things. Grip is the way we are holding the stick, and technique is the body motions. Okay, so German grip, finger motion, French grip, finger motion. Same technique, different grips. Okay, so it's important that we learn how to hold the sticks in our hands in the most efficient way. I repeat, 90% of the work, in my opinion, is in this part of the development. Once you have this figured out, you will be able to move your body and to kind of like move the sticks and, you know, take advantage of the rebound and do everything in an easier way, because it will be just a matter of moving the body and getting used to, you know, speed it up and do all the steps to work on endurance, speed, and so on. But these are things that are more in an application part. It's just a matter of repetition and doing and spending time with a good system that I will talk about. But if we have any issues in how we're holding the stick, then we'll get stuck. Then it will be impossible to pass certain thresholds. So let's pay attention to this part of this video. Okay, going back to the natural positions of our body. If I think of holding the sticks, without the sticks in my hands, I see how my hands are designed in a specific way. Like my index finger doesn't naturally go all the way down like my middle ring and pinky finger do. So I already have an idea of certain, like how the hand is positioning itself. And if I place a stick inside my hand, I see how I can stay very, like, in a very similar position with my hand. I don't have to change a lot, okay? And so this is another important aspect of, you know, the grip. How should I position the hand? The answer is always as close to the natural positions of my body as possible. Then I can see another element that the stick could go here, could go here, could go, you know, in many, like, there's a range of position that the stick could be in that will definitely change the development of the motion. Okay, so we have to think of the stick as a tool that has two weights, as the back weight and the front weight. When we go up, we have the back weight pulling up, and when we go down, we have the front weight, okay, pulling up. So if we do something like this, we see how the back is pulling up on the upstroke, and then the weight shifts towards the front, right? So this will be something that will impact our motions. In what way? If we hold the stick straight more in line with the thumb and with our forearm, this motion will be more up and down, straightforward. But eventually, it might get a little bit in the way of our wrist. So if we're holding the stick in this way, we might have to get used to open a little bit the fingers to have the space, okay, for the stick to come up and down, and so having more of an open grip instead of a closed one. If instead we hold the stick more going sideways like this, so not following the line of the forearm, but going more on this way, it will be more of a lateral motion, right? So we will develop more of this, which is for, you know, people that have followed the technique since Jim Chapin and Buddy Rich and these guys, that was the actual German grip, right? Because it was developed in this way for the marching and blah, blah, blah. And then it kind of like became an American, which was like a hybrid, you know, thing between the French grip and the German grip and so on. And I think at some level, sometimes it's confusing because it doesn't give you a very specific reference. That's why the way I think about it is this is like a German, pure German, like almost rotating motion. And this, to me, it's still German. We can also call it American. It doesn't really matter to me. But basically, you know, it's just more in line with the thumb or less in line with the thumb, so going more outside, more sideways. Okay, so because of the weights of the stick, one will develop the motion more laterally, and so in a more rounded way. The other will be more straight, but because of the wrist, like the stick could go and hit the wrist, we might need to kind of like open the fingers in order that we can keep the hand and the stick straight without kind of like having the limitation of, you know, space for the stick to be able to move. Understanding how we place the stick inside our hand will determine how we will develop the motion. If it's going to be more of like a lateral rounded motion, or if it's going to be more a straight vertical motion. What are the differences, right? So if we do this, we already see how we are putting more work and more pressure to the fingers and to the grip, because the motion itself is a little bit limited and it's not very straightforward. If instead we work more in a straight position, we see how the stick works more in a straightforward up and down vertical way, which is a more efficient way to bounce the stick because it's just kind of straight. We're not bouncing a basketball with all this motion, but we're just kind of like minimizing the amount of motion that the body should do, and doing the rotating motion will like require us to move more part. It's a less natural, it's a less straightforward motion. So placing the stick more in line with the thumb and more in line with the forearm will allow us to go faster. This is not a right or wrong discussion. This is a more efficient and less efficient. And when we start to work on faster and faster BPM, efficiency will be essential because it will be what will make a big difference when you start to go over a certain threshold, because the less the stick has to travel, the less the body has to move, the faster we can go, and the body needs to activate the muscles less because it's moving less, so you have a more margin of speeding up, dynamics, staying relaxed, so endurance, so it benefits everything in that sense. So placing the stick in one way or the other, it's good to be aware of these differences and understand and even try to, for ourselves, just to make sure that one works better than the other, and just kind of like this is another thing that we should pay attention to in case we get stuck somewhere at a certain speed, to make sure, hey, is my motion, you know, Am I finding myself all the way here because my initial position of holding the stick was this one, and then as I go fast to kind of like straighten up this part, I am activating all of this, and so I'm fixing the problem from here instead of fixing the problem here, right, inside my hand, which is way less, you know, motion and different position than activating all this part. Okay, so we sometimes see drummers, even in other techniques, doing this type of things. It's because they're fixing their grip from the shoulder instead of inside their hands. So this activates a lot of muscles, not very efficient, more body work, so yeah, not the best ergonomic approach. Inside the hand needs a little bit more of education, as always, but it's a more, in the long term, it's a more efficient thing, gets us less tired and so on. Quick heads up, then we'll be right back. If you're studying this technique seriously, I've got full module, drills, and in-depth workouts on my site that go way beyond this. Use the coupon code for a special discount. Let's keep going. An interesting thing that I've been doing, and I always suggest my students to do, is when we are developing like the grip and the technique and everything, we can do part of the practice session, part of the workouts. Of course, when we're practicing, you know, single strokes on a pad or things like that, we can close our eyes. Closing our eyes does something very important to our practice session. It removes the visual reference. Okay, sometimes we are very visual creatures, so we tend to look at things and try to fix them for how they look. But here, if we remove this, if we remove the visual reference, what we're left with is the feeling. And so if something it feels uncomfortable, and we remove, you know, the visual element, and we free all these sensors to feel like to be more focused on the feeling, we will start feeling the body automatically. I've seen this hundreds of times, thousands of times happening. The body will start to reorganize itself just like with the reference of the feeling. So it just wants to make something uncomfortable comfortable, which is the entire point, right? We just want to be comfortable in holding the stick. But so practicing and closing our eyes, it's something that made really wonders, and it was kind of like a magic thing. I usually feel my students when they do that, because they see how everything gets to, like, it reorganizes, the system reorganizes itself, and it goes like, and it starts to be like, oh. And then I tell them, open your eyes, and usually the position is way closer to the more correct or more ergonomic position, because we followed the feeling from uncomfortable to comfortable, rather than focusing on the visual aspect that could be also noise that gets in the way of how we feel. Because maybe we see somebody on the internet doing something, and then we want to imitate the position, we want to imitate what we saw, and so we put ourselves in the same position, and we kind of force the motion. But then, especially with the hands, it's not a good method, because somebody might have longer fingers, shorter fingers, you know, wider range motion of the wrist, or, you know, longer thumb, shorter thumb. There's too many elements here that we cannot copy. And so just developing, you know, shutting down this part of the sensor system and work on the feeling really made that big impact. You could put a camera and start with your eyes open, and then close your eyes and then look at the video and see how much things have changed if you let, you know, your feeling kind of like take over, and just be like, oh, this is a little bit more comfortable, this is a little bit more comfortable, and then you'll see that the hand eventually will be more and more in the natural position rather than in a, you know, more forced position. So practicing with your eyes closed is also a very important element in developing the hands technique. Awesome. So from here, the next step that it's very important is dealing with external forces. In this case, it's the rebound, right? So if we are doing, like, why is it harder to practice and play single strokes on a surface that doesn't have a rebound, like a pillow or our legs or anything that doesn't bounce, compared to something that has a good rebound? Because in a case of absence of rebound, we're doing all of the work. We're pushing the stick down and pulling the stick back up. When there's something that has a good rebound, we are pushing the stick down, but then the stick is pushed back up by the rebound. So taking advantage of the rebound as much as possible will be like if an external force, it actually is exactly like an external force doing the work for us, especially the hard part of the work, because going from here to down, we have the gravity that works in our favor. But going from down to back up, we don't have the gravity in our favor. But if the rebound does that for us, then the rebound is doing the hard work and we're doing the light work. So this gets to a confusing part of the wrist motion. We shouldn't think of pushing the stick down and developing the motion going down, but we should think of pulling the hand back up, because we want to follow the stick up. If instead we focus on pushing down, what we're going to do, we're going to block the rebound, and then we have to pull the stick back up on our own. If instead we think of reacting right away, which is exactly what happens to the stick as it hits the surface, it wants to bounce back, and we allow the stick to bounce back by following the stick back up instead of blocking it and pulling it back up, we will see how 50% of the work at least is done from the external forces, which is the rebound in this case. So we take advantage of the rebound instead of blocking it and doing all the work physically. A great thing that we can do to really understand how much we're taking advantage of the rebound is practicing with very heavy sticks. When we practice with heavy sticks, these are aluminum sticks. These are like at least 3 or 4 times heavier than my regular Vickford wood sticks. The way I understand if I'm taking advantage and how much I'm taking advantage of the rebound is if I feel the weight of the stick at all when I'm practicing. The more I feel the weight of the stick, the less I'm taking advantage of the rebound. Because if the rebound is pulling the stick up, I shouldn't be feeling the weight of the stick, because the weight of the stick is pushed up by the rebound. So there should be, even with the finger motions, which fingers are even a weaker part of the hand compared to the wrist, even with finger motion I should be able to not feel the work, not feel the weight of the stick almost at all, or the least possible. So when I practice with heavy sticks, I don't practice with heavy sticks to do weight lifting, right? I'm not trying to get stronger, and I would go to the gym to do that. Here I'm doing the opposite. I want to actually make sure that I'm not feeling the weight of the stick at all, so that my fingers are completely relaxed and I don't do the work. I let the rebound do the work, which is something that with regular sticks is a little bit harder to understand because they're way lighter, and so it's harder to understand if we're actually pulling the stick up or if the rebound is doing the work for us, or how much we're doing that. Are we pulling the stick back up for 60% and 40% is doing the rebound, or like, we want to get to the most efficient approach, so we want the rebound to do most of the work, at least 80% of the work, and so we want to think of developing the motion not like this, but like this. In fact, what is speed? Speed is the reaction, the speed of reaction of the muscle, right? How fast we can get away from the surface rather than down. The faster we can react, the faster we can play the next stroke. And so thinking of coming off the surface we're playing on will allow us to go faster and to take advantage of the rebound rather than thinking of pressing down. Okay, so this is another very important thing to keep in mind when we are developing the motion. We want to think of this and not this. So without reinventing the wheel, basically what I'm talking about is the free stroke. Simply the free stroke. The free stroke, which is most of the time is thought of or learned for more of an arm motion type of approach, right? But if we think of the free stroke applied to wrist motion or finger motion, it will be the same concept. It's just the rebound doing most of the work and us kind of like developing the motion in a way that will allow the stick to and the rebound to do the work. So again, going back up instead of pushing down. Hey there, a quick one. If you're into what you're watching, you'll love the full lessons and workouts on my website. I cover all these topics and more. Use the coupon code to have a discount. All right, thanks. Back to the action. And so the next element that will be important here is the fulcrum point. For example, a good way for me to develop, like to think and kind of like understand the fulcrum point, well, the very first one is closing my eyes and just letting the feel, right? But then going back to the two weights of the stick, I can think of focusing on the weight on the tip of the stick. While I'm going down, I can think of here, this part doing the hammer effect of kind of like throwing the weight towards the front. And I will feel like if I hold a stick here, I won't feel a lot of action, like a lot of work here. I will feel, it will be a weird feeling. If I hold a stick way in the back, I might feel a little bit too much action. So another part that I can pay attention to is the back weight of the stick. In fact, if I go all the way back up here, I don't feel a lot of work here. I feel a lot of pushing up here, a bit too much. And so I understand that, you know, it's not a very efficient place, a very great place where to hold a stick. And here I'm eliminating the back weight of the stick. And so all the weight is only on the front, and so also not efficient. So depending on the type of sticks that you have, you can focus on the front and the back weights. So the front will be going the action of the stick doing this, and the back will be the action of the stick doing this, going up. And thinking of these two elements and moving slightly the stick, you know, the grip or where I'm holding the string, so the fulcrum point a little bit up or down, I will find a spot that I will feel it's a little bit more convenient and where I feel the two weights working in a more balanced way than, you know, just kind of like randomly not even paying attention to this element. So thinking of the weight of the front weight going down or the back weight going up. So here what also is important for the fulcrum point, I feel it's the height of the forearm, because if we are holding the stick in a certain way but then we have to go way more down than up, we will feel like we will have to, it'll be better to have less pull up from the back of the stick, because we already have a position that is oriented on going back up. And so we will eventually, you know, have to calibrate better this motion. And if we're all the way down, it will be the opposite. We might feel like we have to hold the stick a little bit more in the center, because we don't want to feel all this weight that will make us, the top part of our forearm, work way more. So also understanding like different, like trying different heights of the forearm will change the fulcrum point, okay? Because we're working with this lever like of weights that are like, if it's pushing too much from the back, will be uncomfortable and we might need to adjust the position of the hand of the fulcrum point, or if it's too low, the way around. So calibrating the height and where we're holding the stick will be important. It's a little bit like calibrating the height of the heel and where we're placing our foot on the pedal board, which are correlated for the feet, okay? So the concepts are always the same, which is always something that allows me to compare and confirm if one approach is more efficient than another. A good way of understanding if we're taking advantage of the rebound could be of basically having a 3-point grip only with our stick and just let the stick bounce, because in this way we are going to force ourselves to kind of like allow the stick to bounce, because the moment we don't allow that, we will feel way more tension. While if we hold a stick with all our fingers, it might be way harder to have that feeling, to understand if we're doing the right motion or not, if we have the right approach or not. So holding the stick with less connection with of the hand, so only with the 3 fingers, or we can do even 2 fingers, and making sure we're not choking the stick, but we're kind of like leaving it loose, will really allow us to understand, yeah, I am kind of like working with the rebound, and the stick is kind of like pretty much in my control, so the fulcrum point is kind of like okay. And so this is a good exercise. It's a good thing that we can try and do, just kind of like holding the stick in this way and making sure that we're taking advantage of the rebound, and then do the same thing, have the same feeling with all the fingers. Like, we don't want anything to change as far as feeling from this to having all the fingers. Okay, so this is another good way of making sure that, you know, of testing our synchronization with the rebound. Okay, we have to synchronize with the rebound the same way we have to synchronize with the pedal springs, and this is exactly what they mean when they say the stick should be the extension of your arm. It means that you should be synchronized with the rebound and not, you know, a different, like the body working in a disconnected way from what the stick is working on, like the rebound and the impact and all of that. But you want your body to kind of react to what the stick is experiencing. So it's like literally the stick is an extension of your arm in this way. And of course we can go also back with our heavy sticks and do the same thing, making sure that, you know, we're working on staying synchronized with the rebound, and then putting all our fingers and making sure nothing changes, very little change. Of course, having all the fingers working should be more comfortable than only these 3, but we want to make sure that the feeling is not completely different, that we don't go from this to this, but we stay close to the same synchronization with the rebound. Which brings us to another element which is very important. The connection of the stick to our hand, in the sense that if we start doing this, if we have this going on in our hand, there's a lot of inefficiency here, because it means that part of the motion of the hand is being lost from the stick. We want to instead make sure that the stick stays always connected with the hand and not with the palm of the hand, because it will be too hard to kind of like allow the body to move in this way, but we want to keep it always in contact with the fingers. So I always feel the fingers, right, and the stick moving together, so that all the motion of the wrist is translated to the stick directly and none of it is lost in, you know, sloppy grip. But I want it to be very, you know, always together. Now I'm doing this because the rebound is what allows us to hold the stick to avoid this from happening. So yeah, that's another important element, like making sure that the stick is connected to the fingers as much as possible so that all the motion is translated to the stick and we're not losing work, losing motion that the wrist is doing because of a sloppiness in holding the stick. Awesome, so now we'll get to how to develop speed. First of all, understanding which part of the body, like we want to make sure that when we develop the wrist motion, especially when we're practicing, we're not practicing hybrid motion. We're not doing a little bit of arm, a little bit of wrist, or we're not doing a little bit of wrist and a little bit of fingers, but we want wrist only, and then making sure that we're developing the wrist and we're not getting to kind of like the limit of our wrist motion and then starting to help ourselves with the fingers, which will prevent the wrist from developing even further, because you know we're not, by introducing the finger motion, we're compensating part of the work that the wrist should be doing, and so we never allow the wrist to go beyond that point. Now, this is when we're developing and we're practicing. When we're applying, it doesn't matter. Like, you want to develop as much as possible the wrist motion when you're practicing. So let's say that your wrist motion gets to 200 BPM and in time you want to develop it to 220. Then when you apply it, you will use also the fingers, you will use everything that you have, but let's say when your wrist is 200 BPM, you add the fingers maybe give a 30 BPM more, you get to 230, that's your maximum because you use all your tools. If you develop the wrist from 200 to 220, then you will be adding the 30 extra BPM of the fingers, and then you get to 250. Why? Because you've improved the wrist motion of 20 BPM. To improve the wrist motion 20 BPM, we have to make sure that we are doing the correct motions when we're practicing. So not including the fingers in the practice session and making sure we're not, you know, using the arm and not other parts. So we want to make sure we're doing muscle isolation, like using the correct part of the hand. Okay, so it's important to also understand if we're using the fingers, or if we're using a little bit the fingers and so on when we're practicing. Then again, when we're applying, we will use everything we have in our hands and in our toolbox to get to the speed that we want. We don't have to only play 240, only wrist, because it's a law. We can get the 220 with your wrist and then have the extra 20 BPM of help from the fingers when you're applying, when you're putting on the kit, it's perfectly fine. But if we're trying to develop the wrist motion and we introduce the fingers when we're practicing, we're just preventing the wrist from getting better because we're cheating our wrist by compensating with the fingers, okay? So when we practice muscular isolation, make sure you're working only with wrist and you're not starting to do other motions. That's another important thing when we're practicing speed. Hold up, 3 seconds, promise. Everything you're seeing here is just a taste. My website has full breakdowns, exercises, and structured workouts to master this. Use the coupon code for a discount while you're there. Now, back to the video. Second thing that it's very important is the dynamics. A lot of the people start from a comfortable speed and then they increase the speed, but they also keep the same dynamic. Space and times are connected. So if you don't diminish the amount of space that the stick is traveling at, you're putting more pressure on the fingers because you're basically doing the same motion but faster. And so you're starting to put too much pressure. You get to a point where you put too much pressure on the fingers. So a good way is to actually lower the dynamics to go faster, right? As we going faster, play lower dynamics. This is because space and times are connected. So traveling this amount of space will take a certain amount of time. Traveling half of the space will take half of the time. But there's also a physical element. which is the amount of muscles that we're activating. If we're doing a wide motion, we are moving the body more, we're activating more muscles, and so we also have to deactivate more muscle. If we have shorter motions, we're activating less amount of muscles, so it will be easier for the body to deactivate, and so to do this process faster. Okay, especially when we're developing and we're playing speeds at which we're not used to until that moment. If we are activating too much muscles, so we're playing at a range that it's too wide and too fast for our body, the body will activate other fibers that will kind of like block the motion to prevent us from hurting ourselves. It's a little bit like when we eat and we feel full. We feel like we can't eat anymore. It's not because the body is actually full of food. It's because our system is telling us, let's stop here, because if not, we get sick. The same thing happens here. Like the body goes into protective mode. It goes like, oh, we're activating this muscle fibers to block the motion because we're worried that this will create some kind of like issue to the body. So what you want to do is to minimize this pressure that we're giving to the body at first, so lower dynamics, faster tempo, and then as we get used to this speed, the body will also allow us to increase the dynamic back. So first step should be lowering the dynamics and increasing the speed, and in time, as we get used to that, we will feel like the body will allow us to raise the dynamics. So it should be done in two different steps. I know a lot of people are like, oh, I don't want to sacrifice the dynamics for speed, but if you don't do this, if you don't allow the body to kind of like get to the speed first, get used to this new motion, this new tempo, and then the body will know that that is okay, we're used to that, and so it will allow you to go to get the dynamic back, to increase the volume at this new speed. If we don't do this process, we'll always get stuck at the same point. So this is another important thing, dynamics. Let's find a compromise with dynamic when we're developing, and when we get used to and more comfortable with these new speeds, faster tempos, we can go back, we will feel, the body will be like okay with playing at faster tempos and increase the dynamic. Third element for speed is when we develop the motions, we want to spend time building a comfort zone, right? So we want to spend time at a comfortable speed for 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 5 minutes. In these 2, 3, 4, 5 minutes, what the body is doing is organizing itself, building a comfort zone, which means a grip, a dynamic, a tempo where everything works and our body is comfortable and it can go on for 5 minutes feeling very little work, okay? That's the first part, the first step, which is, making sure that all the mechanisms are okay, the grip is fine, the motion is okay, and so on. When we're developing the speed instead, so once we have the motions, once we can do this at this speed, what is preventing us to doing the same exact thing just faster? Why isn't the same thing just happening way faster? If it can happen at 80 BPM, why can I cannot jump into 280 BPM right away? Okay, because of a series of factors, and especially the body needs to get used to that. The message, the speed of message between the brain and the body has to get trained, and the muscles have to get trained to be activated and deactivated so fast, and all these elements. So what we want to do is to slowly get out of our comfort zone, so get to the limit of our speed. Let's go back to the 200 BPM example. We can play 200 BPM for like 20 seconds, 15 seconds, and we want to start pushing our threshold. So the way you want to push your threshold is 1 bar at the time, right? So you want to start pushing 1 bar in a speed range that you're not comfortable at playing at, so that you start introducing that, because if you want to play at 240, you have to practice at 240. Practicing at 200 won't allow you to play 240, okay? Even practicing at 230 Of course, it's better and it's closer to 240. You have more chances to get to the next level, but you need a system that you understand how exactly to push and to reach the speed that you want, building it day by day and not just randomly being like, oh, I'm close enough, maybe I can get to that point. No, you need to understand, okay, let's start 1 bar and then rest. And then slowly start to do 2 bars. When you feel like 1 bar it's okay, let's start to work on the 2nd bar. 2. 1, 2. So we are increasing the amount of bars slowly. So we get used to 1 bar first, then the body gets kind of like okay with that. Then we start to introduce the 2nd bar, and we get used to the 2nd bar also. And then we get used to the 3rd bar. Okay, so when we feel like, 2nd bar is happening, we start pushing the 3rd bar, always at the same speed. Okay, so if 200 was our limit for like 15 seconds, we want to already kind of like try this at 210, 220, and see how far we can push it. Let's say at 220 we can get to 4 bars, but the 4th bar starts to be like complicated, like you feel the body is kind of barely getting the 4th bar done. You don't want to stop there. You want to increase the speed and try to get 3 bars up at 225 or 230. And then if you can kind of like, let's say you barely get to the 3rd bar at 230, you want to try 2 bars at 235 or 240. You see what I'm doing? So I'm shrinking the amount of bars while I'm increasing the speed. So I want to introduce the speed, even if for 1 bar or even half a bar, it's better than nothing, and then relax the wrist, okay? So that we're slowly letting the system know, hey, let's try this for a short burst, and then in time get more and more used to it, okay? So what am I doing here? I am finding a compromise with the dynamics, finding a compromise with the amount of bars I can play at a certain speed, and then as the body gets comfortable and used to playing at a certain amount of bars, we'll be more relaxed in playing that tempo. We'll also be able to increase the dynamics, and in way less time we'll be able to play at certain speeds that we weren't even getting close to months before, because this is not about strength. It's not about, the muscles that have to become strong and so it needs time, like when we go to no. It's education of the motion, which means educating the grip and all our body to stay relaxed while we're moving and not creating tension, because the motion is kind of like inefficient and we have to hold the stick in a certain way and we're activating parts that there shouldn't be activated, but keep everything as ergonomic as possible. And then once the motion and everything is in place, it's just to kind of like let the body slowly get used to a new speed, new dynamics, and that's a system that will get us to the next level and to increase the speed and be comfortable. And then we will have to kind of like deal with different surfaces also, right? So you want to try this on a pad, then you want to try this on a snare drum, then you want to try this on a tom, and then, the less rebound you have, the harder it will be, of course, to do these type of things. But you also have to let the body and the hands used to each surface. So spending sometimes on the tom, spending sometimes on the floor tom, different surfaces, open hi-hat and a snare, or a ride and a snare, different frequencies, different positions, we will have to kind of like adjust all these little things. But in the meanwhile, we have a system to get our hands faster on the pad. We know how to practice. We know what we have to do, what's happening in the body, and how to get there. So it's just a matter of getting there and executing the right motions and get to the BPMs and the speed that we want to achieve and reach our goals, which is the best feeling when doing anything, especially playing this complicated instrument. If you still have a hard time or you want to go deeper in other techniques and other aspects of drumming, coordination, independence, and all of this, and have me following your progress and helping you progress faster in the right way without injuries, you can join my membership where I do weekly live streaming where you can ask me questions or send me video questions. I can directly help you out on a weekly basis so you don't have to guess if you're doing the right thing, you don't waste time. I follow all the students in my academy, my membership, so that you're guided and I can help you do the right thing and observe all these details on you directly. Okay, so go and check jamespaynedrums.com and you will find all the information, or feel free to contact me and subscribe to my mailing list to stay updated on my future masterclasses, lesson, workouts, and all the activities that I do. I'll see you next time.